Let's get into this. What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the Paddock, the Formula One podcast for the new fans and the familiar. And we are back talking Baku, which seems to be breaking some of the racers' backs. So we're going to talk about all of that and get ready for the next race. So my name is Ray, and this week I'm joined by Pete.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Will.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And our Danny Ricciardo fan Gio will be off this week, which is a shame because it looks like he's been performing a little bit better. But we'll get into that later. So guys, let's talk about the race. Is everything okay for Ferrari?
Ooh. Their Power U has a tendency to blow up at the moment. You know, there was a lovely tweet of the remains of Leclerc's power unit, and there was a lot of oil on the ground.
What's going on there? Like, it looks like his power unit, and then there might be technical issues with Carlos's car as well.
Carlos's was a hydraulics issue, not a power unit issue, but Zhou got taken out by a power unit. Magnussen's power unit also failed as well, so half the Ferrari cars powered cars didn't finish because of the power units failing. Sainz didn't finish because of a hydraulics issue. So the teams had a bit of a choice going into the season: either go for power and fix reliability later, or go for reliability but be stuck with the power you've got. Ferrari went for go for all the power and we'll sort it out later, because as we discussed earlier on, there's an engine freeze. So if you go back to one of our early episodes, we discussed it then.
Yeah. So if they fix their car, are they going to be incurring penalties as the season goes on, or is this going to affect them potentially?
Yeah, they're going to be incurring penalties.
Okay.
Let's hope there's a backdoor for the Ferrari team to get back into Italy without getting heckled. The last time I remember this happened was back in 1991. The Ferrari team boss Cesare Fiorio, he was manager, and they went from a car in 1990 that just lost the championship to McLaren Senna in the second to last race of the year. They went from a very competitive car, Alan Prost behind the wheel, to a car that was not finishing races and was just miles off the pace. And Cesare Fiorio got fired halfway through the season because of it. So let's. Yep, you go ahead.
And didn't Prost get fired for criticising the car?
This is true. Same year. Claudio Lombardi was the team principal that took over Cesare Fiorio. And yeah, with the last race of the season, by that time, Alan Prost had labelled, as Pete said, labelled the Ferrari a truck. So Prost himself also got fired from the team as well.
So with these penalties that they could potentially incur, do you think that this is going to affect the outcome of the championship? Like, you know, we've got Red Bull, who's just performing quite well lately. What are your thoughts on that?
Taking penalties this early on is not good. We saw it last year, you know, with the Mercedes turning their engine up to 11 and having a rocket ship for the last few rounds. They took engine penalties as a tactic, because they also changed how the engine penalties worked a few years ago as a anti-embarrassment after McLaren Honda's 76 grid place penalty for one of their drivers one race weekend.
GP2 engine.
Really?
Yeah. So that's why the engine penalties aren't as bad as they used to be.
Okay, yeah.
So, you know, once upon a time you used to get 10 grid places for some components, and way the McLaren Honda was designed, Honda got pushed to design a very small, tight engine, and they didn't tell McLaren they were struggling. McLaren rushed them into bringing the engine into the car a year earlier than originally planned. So it was just a bad relationship for those two. It wasn't the glory days as they had in the 90s, and as a result it turned a disaster. But it's Red Bull's blessing. Apparently the Red Bull engine is showing minimal signs of wear and minimal signs of loss of power after 7 races. It runs like clockwork.
You know what was really funny, Pete, because we obviously lived and breathed through that time. I heard that the McLaren gave Honda such restriction in relation to the engine space in the chassis that Honda couldn't build the engine as they wanted to because they were given such restriction. And my understanding was that Red Bull were like, "Hey, you tell us how you want the engine, we'll build it around them." Because what's so crazy is as soon as Honda and McLaren broke up, they went to Red Bull and they were instantly competitive. Red Bull and Honda. So I thought that was interesting in itself.
Well, Sauber almost had a deal with Honda, and then they fired their team principal, and the new one tore the contract up.
Yep.
Then Honda went to Red Bull. Now, all right, we'll try out in Toro Rosso because we're not exactly happy with Renault.
Yep, that's right.
That divorce was an ugly divorce.
Still ongoing.
Well, Cyril's not there to serve the tea anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, you're 100% right there, Will. Size 0 ideal for McLaren Honda. Initially, they tried to rework it, but the relationship was damaged.
Yeah.
So do you think that Red Bull's just going to run away with this year now, or is it still competitive as we go along? Because we would say that the first part of the season's over as we embark into the second midway part as the summer goes along. Is Red Bull just going to keep being out front? I mean, it seems like the most interesting battle is going to be between Max and Checo potentially.
Well, it's the first time actually both Red Bull drivers were 1 and 2 in the championship since 2011 with Mark and Sebastian.
Yeah. Ray, I'm going to answer that. Yeah, exactly. What's really funny is you've got Red Bull that's sort of floating in the middle, like they're consistent and fast. You've got Ferrari, which is super fast but keep breaking down. You've got Mercedes, which have porpoising, and they're obviously in that mode of that they're not competitive, but they're finishing races. So you've got both extremes either side of Red Bull, but Red Bull's the core in the middle that's doing everything right, aren't they?
Yeah, it makes me wonder if that's going to maintain as a season, because as we know, potentially Red Bull could have reliability issues by the end, or who knows, and they can keep developing and working on the cars. And bringing up Mercedes, we saw Lewis Hamilton coming out of that car complaining about his back. And I remember reading about how Christian Horner was saying, if it was my driver, I'd be telling them to scream and complain about that as much as possible. Where do you think that lies between how bad the porpoising is affecting these cars? Because I know pretty much all of the drivers have been complaining about it, and theatrics or playing it up to the crowd.
Well, that's the thing. Hamilton wasn't the only one who walked out of a car with a sore back. Hamilton's was quite extreme. He lost feeling in his back. Daniel Ricciardo was holding his back quite a bit as well. Kevin Magnussen's got nerve pain. Carlos has complained. Gasly's complained. That the drivers had a meeting. 19 of the 20 drivers have gone, you need to solve this porpoising issue, because the drivers are never going to save themselves. If they go option between a fast car or a comfortable car, they're going to choose the fast car every time.
Yep.
So, but I'm actually very concerned for Lewis. Way he was moving and way he got out the car, if his back's not right by this weekend for Montreal, he may not race. There's a test the drivers have to do whereabouts have to get out the car within a certain time frame in an event of an accident and need to get away from the vehicle as quickly as possible. Way he was moving, he didn't look like he was going to be able to do that in a quick and timely manner. So, I know adrenaline does amazing things, but if you can't pass the test, they're not going to let you race.
Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting, because it does seem like, that they're putting their bodies under some extreme stress. And I think my favorite camera is that in-helmet camera, and we just see their head shaking almost violently for basically an hour straight under some extreme G-forces. So you think it has to be affecting their body. 6
Gs for Hamilton. And he was running an experimental setup, and I'll admit as well, I thought, the porpoising, Mercedes is just hamming up, they're struggling with it, but hearing more and more drivers complain, I'm wrong. I was wrong initially. It happens. But you know, the teams need to come up with a solution. They may not have a solution for this by the end of this season, but they might look at something. Like, one option they could do is go back to active suspension, but restrict it to fixed number of ride heights, so you can have a minimum ride height for going down the straights, or sorry, not a minimum, maximum ride height for going down the straights, a minimum ride height for low speed corners, and then 2 others for medium and high speed corners. So you're still getting downforce.
It's just it's just a fine line, because rather than the driver controlling the car, the actual pit crew are controlling the car around corners with active suspension. So it's not necessarily just about the driver, and that was the argument back in the early 90s and the 1992 Williams car, which blitzed everyone.
But with those active suspensions back in the day, they were able to program it meter by meter, whereas what I was suggesting is highly restricted. All right, you've got 4 slots. Set your car up for that. You've locked in by the time qualifying happens. Then that makes it a bit like the engine power unit. Because remember, the engineers set a lot of deployment for the battery packs as well. They decide at what point to discharge, and then the driver can override with the overtake.
Yeah. Hey, I was just thinking too, like listening to that Nigel Mansell podcast the other week. As much as he blitzed everyone, he said the active suspension worked if you were prepared to put your life on the line. Like, he never ever mentioned once that he was happy with active suspension, and but he was a huge risk taker, and his driving style suited active suspension, where his teammate Riccardo Patrese could not put the same risks in the car. So we are talking 30-year-old technology versus what they would be able to do now, of course. But I'm not convinced with active suspension personally. But I'm not convinced with porpoising either. If we end up having Formula One drivers that retire after a couple of years because they can't walk anymore because of the porpoising. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, it's all because these cars are much larger now, and the design of them is my understanding, and we're on essentially another street track in Baku. What did you think of the race overall? I know people complain that these street tracks are boring, they should be eliminated. What did you think? It seemed like an exciting race to me regardless.
Good pickup, Ray, because we always tend to keep going off course and not talk about things. So back to the race.
Baku's always a good race. Like, I think everyone bar the very first one has been an entertaining race, and this was an entertaining race. Yeah, alright, it wasn't the highlight field one of the previous 2, but it's still a good, entertaining race.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's bad, I wouldn't say it's terrible. It was just a good.
I gotta say, race. I have no idea how they thread, that left-handed turn right before the castle. It is like every time, and I'm watching like Leclerc and all of them, like just during qualifying, just absolutely booking around that corner, and it is such a small window where they are at, and then like especially later on in that race, you see pretty much every single driver kiss the wall, and they're like, yeah, they pretty much just have to rub tires just to get around. Yeah. And like you can tell that they are all just pushing it to the limit. And I've just found that to be, crazy with a castle in the background, which
yeah. It's like Freddie O'Neill was riding a bucking horse with the porpoising.
just blew me away. I was going to say, like, if Gio was here, he'd be saying, "What about the rest of the pack? What about the rest of the field? What do we think of them?"
Well, I think Guan Yu Zhou's in the running for my Chris Amon award for the most unluckiest driver.
Yeah.
So, like, he's been doing everything right. He hasn't really made any mistakes this year, but Ferrari's just letting him down. Well, I'll rephrase that. The Ferrari power unit is letting him down. And Sauber Alfa Romeo strategy is letting him down. Like, it's just really disappointing to see. Gasly had a great race, but touching on AlphaTauri, how was the redneck engineering? I believe they followed the engineer's flow chart.
Oh.
You know, it's moving and it shouldn't. Gaffer tape.
Oh, gaffer tape. Is there anything gaffer tape can't do?
I was so blown away that
Well,
stuck.
actually, of course it's stuck. It's gaffer tape.
What made me think about is that rock movie with Skyscraper, where he just puts gaff tape on his hands and starts climbing, scaling like the building on the side. I really thought that they were going to retire that car because the announcers are over here going like, "Oh, I've never seen a wing break like that during DRS. They gotta come in," and they just go, and he takes off again.
Mind you, though, it's the first time I've seen the black and orange meatball flag since I can recall. When was the last time you've seen that flag being used in an F1 race?
I can't remember. I don't even think I remember a time. That's how much I don't remember.
So for context viewers, there's one of the flags that the stewards can use is the black flag with a orange circle on it. That tells that particular driver your car is unsafe. Proceed to the pits immediately for repairs or retire. So it's the first time I've seen that being used in my memory.
Yeah.
In an F1 race.
Yep. Agree.
So,
the only time I can possibly think of is a couple of times when the pits and the jacks stuck to the back of the car and they've gone around the track or something. But even then, I don't think it brought out the flag. Rather than it be a disqualification. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So no, you're right, Pete. It doesn't happen very often, and good. No, not good to see it, but amazing to see that flag again.
the things I saw people tweeting about a lot were McLaren. And how they were performing, and then I keep seeing even Damon Hill was talking about Alonso holding up the pack again. What is up with this?
Well, that's the thing with the Alpine in that race. It was a rocket ship down the straights. It was the fastest car through the speed trap by a good distance. The McLarens with DRS were actually losing time to the Alpines. Wow. So they'll get within a second by the time the 2.2 kilometer main straight comes along. They get to the DRS section of that, and they'll start losing 3/10 and slip underneath a second. So that's why Daniel, especially at the end, couldn't actually overtake Alonso.
Yeah.
He just didn't have the straight line speed because the McLarens were actually the slowest cars this time around.
Well, let's. Sorry, Pete. You go.
No, you go, Will, because I was about to say, what do you guys think of the McLaren team orders during this race?
I was going to say, let's
Mr. McLaren
let's break it down. Let's talk McLaren. I was going to say that because we had, different tyres on the cars at different moments in time, and at the first stint, Ricciardo was faster but told to hold behind Norris. And then at the end of the race, Norris was on the faster tyre and he was held behind Ricciardo. It was interesting that Norris said at the end of the race, look, I could have been the horrible team and I could have easily overtaken him. But I thought, for the first time, I actually thought that was a very arrogant comment because he was holding Ricciardo up at the start of the race. If he let Ricciardo through, they probably would have been comparable time across the finish line. So... yeah, just I don't know. That's the first time I like Lando. I'm a big fan, but I think steady on here, mate. You did hold Ricciardo up at the start of the race.
I think it's Lando asserting dominance, so to speak. Yeah. The inner bastard's coming out, and he's just going, "I am the clear number one driver. I should have the lead." In saying that, though, you're 100% right. Will Ricciardo could have gone ahead. He obeyed team orders. The team said, hold station behind Lando. We need you to protect him. He's like, okay. He did his job. And then the team looked after him. I thought, fair play to McLaren. And I feel like Daniel made an orthodox strategy work. But McLaren also got lucky with the retirements in this race. They got to the points due to, 3 cars ahead of him retiring.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Very well said.
I agree, and I definitely think that I was a little nervous that they were going to tell Ricciardo to let Lando by at the end, and I was really just pulling from I was like, come on, Danny, just hold on.
Yeah, agreed. He's like, please don't give him Don't make him give up the
Yeah,
position.
because I mean, like that was the first time where I agree with you, Will. Where like, you know, we're getting down to basically the last lap, and it looked like Lando kept, you know, threatening to pass him.
Yep.
Yeah. He was like, "Oh wait, maybe I can get around him here," and I'm like, "Just finish the race. Just finish."
Especially actually right at the end on the last lap, I felt like Lando was kind of showing him, "Hey, I would have overtaken him if I didn't hold back."
Yeah, like, you know, like I could have done this.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's also just showing the age difference a little bit. Daniel's 32, 34 years old. Lando's in his early 20s still. Like, you know, Daniel is trying to bring the team up and forward. And Drew Seidel loves Daniel. But Zach loves Lando, and Lando is the future star of that team. He's on a very long-term contract with them. So, you know, it's kind of interesting dynamics that are happening down there. So Daniel's finally out of Gio's dungeon, but that's right, listeners. The reason why Gio's not here, he's administering punishment to his favourite whipping boy, Latifi.
Is Latifi going to make it to the end of the season?
I've heard a spicy rumour. This upcoming Grand Prix is going to be his last.
Ooh, brutal.
That's a rumour that's been circulating the paddock. So Oscar Piastri is going to take his seat as of 2023. Williams are going to switch from Mercedes to Renault power.
Really?
Williams, Renault. Well, hey, last time that happened, they absolutely destroyed everyone. So that's not a bad move by Williams, you know, because that gives two teams with Renault engines now. So that sort of evens up the field a bit. That's actually a smart move.
Well, Mercedes are also talking of wanting to drop a team. So, you know, it gives Renault Alpine the ability to learn and drive out who's got a stupid amount of talent. It gives Mercedes one less team they have to worry about. You know, Williams get a power unit discount.
Yep. Hey, do you know what too? I always think the one team that's out of place with engines is McLaren, because they're never going to be leading teams if they've got the same engine as a works team. Like, you know, they to me seem like the only team that's out of place with their engine. Like, Porsche or Audi or something, if another engine comes in, I think McLaren needs to they need to get their own engine. So if it is the dominant engine, then they'll win the championship. So.
Oh wow!
You still there, Pete? I think you've locked up.
It looks like he just messaged the group. His internet cut out.
Oh no! That's right. We'll hold the fort, Ray.
Yeah.
You know what was one of my most favorite bits of the race? Sebastian Vettel's overtake on Ocon, went off the track and did the most beautiful pirouette spin to come back on the track, and has just carried on as if nothing happened, and I think he lost one place. It was incredible.
I'm always blown away by how they can do that. Like, just, you know, like on a dime. I first saw it, I think, when they were touring the Red Bull car around all of the states and countries to hype up Miami. And they've just got this thing in street corners of New York, just pirouetting, like you said, in one spot. I'm just blown away that, they have so much control over these cars, because here they are pushing them to the limit in hundreds of miles an hour, and it can barely stay on the road. But I think within any instant they want to, they tap the power and they can spin that car around completely.
Yeah.
It just makes you think, they're doing everything they can to keep this car on the road, and it can really slip off as quickly as possible just because it's that powerful.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's probably 2.5 car lengths wide, that escape road. I mean, in my Silbury Outback, that would probably be a 16-point turn for me to turn around in it. And, and Vettel does it in, like, he does it the most perfect 180 spin to get back on the track, and I think they said he only lost 6 seconds in doing it, and that's phenomenal.
I've grown to love Vettel too.
Yeah, that's right. And after the race, apparently he just shrugged it off too. So they're like, talk about that spin. He's like, I spun, got back on, got on with it. I would have myself would have been like, yes, I'm a hero. Did you see that 180 spin to get back on the track? I'm a champion.
People would still be hearing about it for months later. Just me, just like at a party, like, oh man, but I did pirouette. Hey.
All right, sorry guys, my internet decided to cut out. So I had to,
no worries.
reboot my network termination device and my router.
Alright, so I guess
back to Latifi.
Well then, now that you're back, let's talk or Latifi, or do you want to talk guess getting ready for the next race?
Montreal.
Yeah.
So Montreal is one of my favourite tracks. It's built on a man-made island in the St. Lawrence River. It first held its first Grand Prix in 1978. Now, this track here is a series of straights punctuated by sharp braking for small chicanes, which are changed variously. There's a tight hairpin before the long back main straight, and then the Wall of Champions. This wall got a nickname after the 1999 Grand Prix, where Hill, Villeneuve and Schumacher all crashed into the wall of the last chicane on the last corner before the main start-finish line. So, and several other drivers have crashed in there since. Vettel, Hamilton, Magnussen, to name a few. It has claimed many scalps this World Champions. Some memorable moments of the Montreal Grand Prix. Mansell got cocky in 91, stalled his car and cost him victory. As I mentioned before, this track is heavy in brakes, as Mercedes found out in 2014, cost him a race win and gave us Daniel Ricciardo's first. Longest race on record was held at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve, a little over 4 hours due to various rain delays, eventually run by Jenson Button after 6 pit stops and crashing into his teammate Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso.
6 pit stops?
6 pit stops. I have watched that Grand Prix. He didn't lead the race until the last lap, when Seb spun in the wet. And the last time we were there, it was a birthplace of a meme template. Seb Vettel got a 5-second penalty for rejoining the track unsafely, costing him the race win. In a tantrum, he moved the first place bollard to the front of his car and moved the second place bollard to whereabouts his car should have been parked, because he was that frustrated he didn't actually park whereabouts the podium finishers were meant to park. So, as I mentioned before, this track is named after Gilles Villeneuve, who Will's now going to speak about.
Absolutely, and I'm just going to continue with what you said, Pete. That was brilliant. And to the F1 gamers out there, Canada is a really, really fun track to race on. And just to really articulate that race of champions, there's a massive, massive long straight, and then it is just this final chicane, and then you've got the checkered flag. So this final chicane, the race of champions, if you stuff up the braking, you are off, or you are into the wall. I thought it'd make you laugh. I've actually got a list of the number of F1 drivers that have hit that wall. So we've got Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, Kevin Magnussen, Jacques Villeneuve ×2, Ralf Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello, Nick Heidfeld, Juan Pablo Montoya, Antonio Liuzzi, Kamui Kobayashi, Sebastian Vettel, Bruno Senna, Pastor Maldonado, Carlos Sainz, Ricardo Zonta, Alex Wirtz, Jenson Button and Tiago Montero.
So will Latifi join that list?
Who did?
Nicholas Latifi. Will he join that list?
Oh, will he join the list?
Yep.
All right, that's a bet. That's a bet. Yep. Okay. If he does, I'm going to call it. Yes, he will.
Actually,
Yeah, he's to be amongst the greats.
will Mick John his father?
Yes, that's right. That's true. That's true.
You know, he's another driver who's been struggling of late.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. No. Someone's going to hit it. My money is Latifi. What do you guys think?
I mean, I'm just hoping for a good race. It's kind of like what you said, though, about how the last race at the end, I mean, the last lap at the end, everything can change. And I feel like on every race, I'm looking on Twitter and everyone's saying, like, oh, this race is going to be this is boring, yada, yada, yada. And there might be about 10 laps or so that are boring. But something always happens at the end that's always, like, keeps you entertained or like something always happens that we can talk about, I feel like.
There's always some form of drama.
Absolutely. Actually, before I go into Gilles Villeneuve, sorry, I got one more thing I just thought of, which was funny. It's good to see Azerbaijan have finally got their act together in relation to cleaning the track up, because a few years ago, I think there was some learnings, but the tow truck that came on the track to pick up the cars, what was it, Pete? 3 years ago, the tow truck actually, the crane itself smashed into a overpass of where pedestrians go over the track. This truck went fanging down the straight and smashed into this overpass and damaged the train, and the car it was picking up was getting covered in oil from the hydraulics of the crane on the truck. So, I think the race was postponed for about an hour because they not only had to clean up the car, but they had to clean up the truck, and they had to clean up the oil that was being spilt from the truck.
Was that the race that Bottas lost due to a puncture through debris that was left on the track as well?
Because I've only just thought of it, I can't quite remember. It probably was, but I just remember watching that race going, what the hell is going on right now? This is a circus. So, yeah, anyway, good old memory lane. All right, so let's get into driver profile, my favourite part of the session. As Pete mentioned, we're going to talk about Gilles Villeneuve, or his real name is Joseph Gilles Henry Villeneuve. He was born in 1950. He was a Canadian race driver, hence the Canadian Grand Prix is named after him. He actually started in snowmobile racing in Quebec in Canada, and then moved into single-seaters. He won the US and Canada Formula Atlantic Championships in 1976, and he was offered a drive with McLaren in 1977 midway through the season to finish off some races. They decided that they didn't want to sign him for the following year, but Enzo Ferrari was very interested and impressed by his driving, and he got offered to race for the rest of the season in 1977, and it drove with Ferrari full seasons from 1978 to 1982. One of the heroic barbarians back in the day at the time, James Hunt, was also very impressed by Gilles Villeneuve, and James Hunt was actually beaten by Villeneuve in a non-competitive race where James Hunt was like, yeah, this guy, he's good, he's a fast driver. In today's world, it doesn't sound like much, but he had 6 race wins, and that doesn't feel like very much in today's standards when we have Hamilton with 103 wins, Max Verstappen, the youngest driver ever, with 25 wins, and Vettel wins in his 40-something wins. 50s now, yep. So all in all, 6 wins doesn't sound like much, but he was a very well-known and very highly rated driver. He was the first. He was the first person to win a Canadian Grand Prix in Formula One, and he still remains to this day the only Canadian driver that has won the Canadian Grand Prix. His highest championship finish was second by only 4 points to teammate Jody Scheckter in 1979. Some of the highlights of Gilles Villeneuve's career in the 1978 Grand Prix in the USA in a Friday practice session in the wet weather, he was 9 to 11 seconds faster than any other driver in the wet weather. Wow. So you guys have heard my absolute love and passion for Jean Alesi, who was heroic in the wet. these two have been rated as very similar drivers, and they also share the same red Ferrari number 27 number as well. So absolutely talented drivers, both very amazing in the wet weather, as we can say. Ron Dennis actually offered a contract to Villeneuve in, I think it was the 70... I think it was the 81 season, I think it was. So Ron Dennis was the team principal of McLaren, but Villeneuve decided to stay at Ferrari. Another memorable moment was at the very end of his racing career, which was the 1982 Italian Grand Prix with his run-in with his teammate Didier Pironi. So it was a very intense argument, and it was all about both drivers were instructed to conserve fuel, but Villeneuve understood that to be that he stays in the lead, and they basically finished as they were, but Pironi overtook him, and Villeneuve thought that this was just to please the Italian crowd, obviously with Ferrari drivers, etc. So then he overtook Pironi again, and then with one lap to go, Pironi made a very dangerous, aggressive move and chopped in front of Villeneuve at one of the final corners to win the race. And Villeneuve was so furious with Pironi that he took a vow of silence and chose and said he would never ever speak to Didier Pironi ever again. But the saddest part of all of this was 2 weeks before the actual death of Gilles Villeneuve, unfortunately. So it was the following race in 1982. It was a crash that was a bit of an interesting one. It was in qualifying with 8 minutes left of the session, and there was a bit of a misunderstanding of him trying to overtake Jochen Mass in qualifying. So they went round one of the chicanes, and Jochen Mass pulled over to the right of the lane, and Villeneuve veered through, but there was also another car on the track that Villeneuve swerved to avoid, but unfortunately he clipped Jochen Mass's car, and that actually catapulted the car at 230 k's an hour. So it launched into the air, 230 or 200 to 225 k's, they say, which is the equivalent of 124 to 140 miles per hour. It was airborne for more than 100 metres or 330 feet. Nosedived into the ground, disintegrated as it somersaulted along the edge of the track. Villeneuve was still strapped into his seat, but no helmet, and he was thrown a further 50 metres or 160 feet from the wreckage into the catch fencing. Unfortunately, he didn't die on the scene, but he succumbed to fatal fracture of the neck in hospital. So he was transferred to the hospital. His wife was there, but yeah, he passed away in hospital. So his statistics was that he had 67 race starts, 6 wins, 13 podiums. Another very, very famous driver, Niki Lauda, his quote was that Gilles Villeneuve was the craziest devil he ever came across in Formula One. A very interesting fact is Gilles Villeneuve's son Jacques Villeneuve made it to Formula One and became a world champion in 1997. Wow. So the legacy has lived on with Jacques Villeneuve. And one thing I like to describe is drivers' helmets. I've always had a very big fascination with driver helmets, and there's a huge amount of nostalgia behind helmets. Gilles Villeneuve's helmet was black with a really big red V on the side of it. We should show a picture of something, shouldn't we? There was some recognition and why he was so famous. There's actually a corner at the San Marino Italian Grand Prix that's named after Gilles Villeneuve too, because he had a big crash there. So he's got actually 2 names on 2 tracks out there. And going into this weekend, probably the perfect one to talk about Villeneuve as the driver of the week, and once again another big racing icon in the Formula One world.
I'm just like gutted after that story. It was a turn I guess I didn't expect. He said he wouldn't talk to that guy for 2 weeks. What did that guy say after he passed?
Yeah, I should have looked that up, shouldn't I?
I think Pironi was pretty devastated by it because he wanted to mend bridges, and wasn't able to, sadly.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking. I mean, it's amazing to see that the legacy lived on later on through his progeny. But man, I mean, it shows you, the precariousness of racing. As we get ready for this week, thank you for that, Will. I was taken away by that one. I really was. I didn't expect to hear the death. That's always it always takes me off guard. So as we get ready for this week, do you guys have any final predictions? And who would like to send us off?
I'm happy to, unless Pete, unless you want to, or
Will, you can do the sign off.
Okay, so coming up is the Canadian Grand Prix. Adelaide time, 3:30 a.m. So it's going to be very difficult to watch that race here on a Monday morning. Although us die-hard Formula One fans, nothing will get in our way, even if Formula One decides to make it very difficult for us here in Australia. New York time is on a Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. So, as we mentioned, watch out for... That's right. That's right. Yes. Expect crashes, Wall of Champions. Someone is going to hit that wall, so watch out for that. I found, I think, a very, very perfect timed quote, because we always like to finish with a quote. This one comes from Toto Wolff from Mercedes, and the importance of Ferrari in F1 and for them to be competitive. It's a very straightforward, basic one. Toto Wolff has said, F1 needs Ferrari much more than Ferrari needs F1. Yeah, I thought that was very appropriate at the moment. So come on, Ferrari, let's get it back together. Competitive championship. So, you've been listening to The Paddock, a Formula One podcast for racing enthusiasts, coming at you from Adelaide, South Australia and New Jersey, USA. We love your feedback. Please subscribe to our channels. You'll find us on all the social media platforms. We will answer any comments. We love to hear from you, so stay tuned. Thanks for listening again, and we look forward to catching you again soon.
Peace.